I've carried this secret for years, pretending everything was normal while my life unraveled behind closed doors. I don't know if I'm the victim or the monster in this story, but after what happened, I'll never be the same. I used to be the chief surgeon at this hospital, the one who led the team that separated conjoined twins in a marathon operation. But when I showed up in the ER as a patient, doubled over with appendicitis, the staff treated me like I was nothing. Worse than nothing. Nurse Brenda, she ripped off my hijab, humiliated me in front of strangers, and forced me to prove I wasn't faking. By the time my appendix ruptured, I realized the abuse wasn't random. Complaints about her had disappeared, security footage erased. And now? Someone's been breaking into my apartment, leaving slashed tires and threatening notes telling me to stop digging. It started the moment I walked into that ER. My body was on fire, sweat soaking through my scarf, vomit still crusted on my sleeve from the cab ride. Every step sent shockwaves through my gut. I could barely hold myself upright when Brenda's typing stopped mid-keystroke. She looked me up and down, my scarf, my face, the way I clutched my side, and then casually waved me toward the back corner like I wasn't even human. Minutes crawled by. An elderly couple strolled in after me, and Brenda called them forward instantly. Then 3 more patients. Each one seen before me while I sat there trembling, my vision blurring. She didn't so much as glance in my direction until finally, she raised her voice, the religious woman in the headscarf in the back. Every head in the waiting room turned as I staggered up, gripping the armrest just to stand. During triage, she refused to let me sit. My knees locked just to keep me from collapsing. The room spun. My fever burned at 102, but she scribbled down 95 like it was nothing. I tried explaining classic symptoms, rebound tenderness, sharp pain in the lower right quadrant, but she cut me off. You probably don't even know what appendicitis is, she scoffed. Then, to her colleague, she muttered something about my type having different pain tolerances. I begged to use the restroom. I was about to vomit again, but she flatly said facilities were for processed patients only. By then, I'd been waiting 2 hours. My mouth tasted metallic, bile rising. The walk back to my seat felt like an endless gauntlet. An hour later, she called me again, this time demanding ID. When I reached for my wallet, she suddenly yanked my hijab off my head. Proper identification requires full facial visibility, she said, dangling my scarf like it was contaminated. My hair tumbled down and I felt stripped bare in front of everyone. Some people looked away, some looked disgusted, but no one spoke. Then came the final humiliation. She jabbed her fingers straight into my abdomen, right where it hurt most. I screamed. My knees buckled, crashing onto the floor, but she wasn't done. She scribbled on her chart and ordered me to walk laps around the waiting room to prove I wasn't faking. I managed maybe 3 steps before my body gave out. I vomited bile onto the floor as pain ripped through me like fire. Tears blurred my vision. Brenda recoiled, calling for janitorial. If you can't control yourself, you'll wait outside, she sneered. I whispered through gritted teeth, I'm a doctor. My appendix is about to rupture. That's when she snapped. She screamed that I was making terrorist threats by pretending to be a doctor. Security grabbed me by the arms and dragged me toward the exit. Go back where you came from, she spat. They tossed me onto the pavement just as my body gave out completely. Pain consumed me. Darkness edged my vision. And then as I collapsed, my old hospital ID slipped from my bag. Chief of Pediatric Surgery 2015 to 2020. Dr. Amamira Hassan. The intake nurse picked it up and froze. Oh my God, you're her. Security's grip loosened. Another nurse gasped. The conjoined twin surgeon? Voices rose around me. Get her to surgery now. Hours later, I woke up in recovery. Brenda stood pale-faced in the doorway beside the administrator. He asked me directly if I wanted her fired. I stared at her for a long, heavy moment. Finally, I said, no. Not because I forgave her. Not because I wasn't broken and humiliated. But because I realized something. Brenda had no idea what storm was about to hit her. 2 days later, I walked right back through the main entrance of that hospital. Every step sent a dull throb through my surgical site, but I forced myself to stand tall. I refused to look weak, not here, not now. The security guard who had dragged me out onto the pavement? He was on duty again. The moment our eyes met, recognition flickered across his face. He froze, then quickly stepped aside, saying nothing. I took the elevator to the 4th floor, the administrative offices. The hallway stretched out like a tunnel, fluorescent lights buzzing above me like they were whispering accusations. Staff passed by whispering, stealing glances. Some nodded respectfully. Others avoided my eyes altogether. Word had spread. They all knew what had happened in the ER. I reached the office of Dr. Theodore Blackwood, the chief medical officer. His secretary looked up, and the instant she saw me, she stood straight. Everyone knew who I was now. She knocked lightly, whispered through the door, then gestured for me to enter. Dr. Blackwood rose from behind his massive mahogany desk. Tall, silver-haired, glasses perched low on his nose. He was a man I had worked beside for years when I was chief of pediatric surgery. He extended his hand. I shook it firmly, ignoring the sharp pull of pain at my incision. He gestured for me to sit. The leather chair groaned under me as I lowered myself carefully. He leaned back, fingers steepled, studying me. I didn't waste time. I pulled out my phone and slid it across his desk. Photos I'd taken in recovery, my chart with the falsified temperature, the word hysteria scribbled as a diagnosis before my appendix ruptured. His jaw tightened as he scrolled. He rubbed his temples, silent. Before he could speak, I pulled out something else, a folder. Inside, printed emails. Testimonies from 3 nurses, 2 orderlies, and even a patient. Each one described what they had witnessed, Brenda humiliating me, denying basic care, calling security while I was visibly deteriorating. Dr. Blackwood read every word, his face darkening with each page. Then, without a word, he requested Brenda's personnel file. Minutes later, his secretary delivered a thick manila folder. He opened it, scanned a few pages, and his expression shifted from concern to alarm. He turned the folder toward me. Inside were 3 prior complaints, each from patients wearing hijabs or religious coverings, each dismissed as misunderstandings or cultural differences. And every single dismissal signed off by the same nursing supervisor. My stomach clenched, not from surgery pain but from the truth staring me in the face. This wasn't an isolated incident. This was a pattern. And the hospital had protected her. Dr. Blackwood closed the folder slowly. He walked to the window, staring out at the parking lot, his back to me. The clock ticked loudly in the silence. Finally, he said Brenda would be placed on administrative leave pending investigation. But I shook my head. That wasn't enough. I stood, ignoring the pull at my stitches. I told him I wanted in. I wanted access to every complaint. I wanted to speak to the other patients. I wanted transparency. He started to object, but I cut him off. I reminded him of who I was, what I had given to this hospital. 5 years of my life. Groundbreaking surgeries that had brought prestige and headlines. Dozens of residents I had trained who were now saving lives across the country. And when I needed help most, his staff had almost killed me because of the scarf on my head and the color of my skin. The next morning, I showed up at the hospital at 7 a.m. sharp. Brenda's shift started at 8. I stood in the lobby, positioned with a clear view of the employee entrance. My surgical site throbbed from standing, but I ignored it. At 7:45 she appeared. Coffee in hand, laughing with another nurse. But the second she saw me, the cup slipped from her grasp. It shattered on the tiles, brown liquid pooling around her shoes. She froze. Her colleague looked between us, confused. Brenda's face went pale as paper. I didn't move. I didn't need to. Security approached her quietly, firmly. They handed her a letter. She didn't need to open it, she knew exactly what it said. Administrative leave. Effective immediately. She glanced at me one last time before being escorted away. Over the next week, I ignored my doctor's orders to rest. I dove headfirst into the investigation. I interviewed the women behind those previous complaints. Their stories were harrowing. One had lost her baby after waiting 6 hours for care. Another had almost died from an allergic reaction because Brenda brushed her off as being dramatic. I compiled everything, the testimonies, the systemic failures, the supervisor who buried complaints, the lack of cultural training, the absence of accountability. But Brenda wasn't done fighting. She lawyered up. Filed a grievance with the nursing union. Claimed she was following hospital protocol and that I was destroying her career out of spite. Then the threats began. Notes slipped into my hospital mailbox. Warnings to back off. One morning I found my car tires slashed in the hospital garage. Security reviewed the footage, but the cameras were useless. Conveniently angled away. Timestamps corrupted. Someone was covering for her. Someone powerful. Dr. Blackwood summoned me again. But this time I wasn't alone with him. Sitting beside him was the hospital's legal counsel, a woman in a sharp black suit who introduced herself as Victoria Jones. She didn't waste a second. The hospital wanted to settle quietly. She slid a number across the desk, more than enough to cover my medical bills and lost wages. All I had to do was sign a non-disclosure agreement and walk away. I stared at the paper. Then I tore it clean in half. The investigation dragged on, but suddenly everything started slipping through my fingers. Witnesses who once spoke freely now avoided me. Files I needed vanished from archives. And the nursing supervisor, the one who had waved away all those past complaints? She conveniently took early retirement before I could question her. And then Brenda came back. Her union fought hard and won an injunction, so she returned to work, just reassigned to another department. But I still saw her in the hallways. She didn't avoid me. No, she smirked. Every time our eyes met, that smug little smile told me exactly what she thought. She was untouchable. One afternoon, I was buried in patient records in the medical library when a young resident slipped into the chair across from me. Dr. Theo Martinks. He had been there the night it all happened. His eyes darted nervously around the room before he slid something across the table, a USB drive. His voice was barely above a whisper. He said it held the real security footage. Not the corrupted version the hospital claimed was all that remained. He had saved it before someone in IT could erase it. I plugged it into my laptop. My stomach knotted as the files loaded. And then there it was. Clear as day. Brenda yanking off my hijab. Brenda pressing down on my abdomen while I screamed in agony. Brenda ordering security to throw me out. And worst of all, Brenda laughing with her colleagues afterward, bragging about teaching me a lesson. But that wasn't all. Audio files. Emails. Record after record of her making bigoted comments, bragging about delaying care for those people, mocking patients in private messages. It wasn't just me. This was a pattern, documented, undeniable. Martinks leaned closer, his hands trembling. He said Brenda had friends in IT who usually scrubbed evidence like this. But this time he got there first. I copied everything. 3 separate drives, one for Dr. Blackwood, one for the board, and one for my lawyer. Because at this point I knew I needed one. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about every single patient she had hurt. The board meeting was 3 days away. I prepared relentlessly. Every testimony, every file, every damning piece of proof meticulously organized. Brenda might have her allies, but I had something stronger. The truth. The morning of the meeting, I arrived early. The boardroom sat at the very top of the hospital, walls of glass overlooking the city. I set up my laptop, tested the projector, everything had to be flawless. But when I tried to open my files, nothing. Corrupted. Every single USB drive, wiped clean. My chest tightened with panic, but I forced it down. The originals were still at home. I called Dr. Martinks. No answer. I paged him. Silence. Finally, I tracked down a resident who knew him, only to hear that Martinks had been suddenly transferred to another hospital out of state. Effective immediately. No forwarding information. My blood ran cold. I stood in that boardroom, staring at a blank screen as my hands trembled. The meeting was 20 minutes away, and without evidence I had nothing but my word. My phone buzzed. An unknown number. I answered. Heavy breathing. Then a whisper, "Leave the hospital now if you know what's good for you." The line went dead. I sank into one of the leather chairs, my incision throbbing with every beat of my heart. Through the window, the sun stretched long shadows across the parking lot. Somewhere in this building, Brenda was probably smiling. The door opened. Dr. Blackwood entered with 5 board members. They took their seats. The board chair, a sharp-eyed woman in her 70s, fixed her gaze on me. I told them about the corrupted files. About Martinks's sudden disappearance. About the threats. The board exchanged skeptical glances. One member tapped her pen impatiently, another checked his watch. Dr. Blackwood suggested we reschedule. The chair agreed. And just like that, I was dismissed. Politely. Efficiently. Powerless. I left the boardroom on shaky legs. And in the hallway, I collided with Brenda. She was in fresh scrubs, a smug smile curling her lips. She brushed past me deliberately, her shoulder slamming into my incision. Pain shot through me. Back in my car, I tried to salvage what I could. I dialed into my home computer remotely. But the files were gone there too. My backups wiped. Even my cloud storage erased. Whoever was backing Brenda up wasn't just good, they were skilled, connected, dangerous. When I finally walked into my apartment, something felt wrong. Nothing obvious, but subtle things. A drawer left open. Papers slightly moved. Someone had been here. Then my neighbor, Mrs. Jones, knocked. She mentioned seeing maintenance workers earlier. Except no one had called them. And her description? It didn't match anyone from the building staff. My stomach sank. I tried rebuilding my evidence. I called the women who had filed complaints. 2 numbers disconnected. The 3rd woman picked up, then hung up the second I gave my name. When I tried again, the call was blocked. That night, an email arrived from HR. My hospital privileges were suspended, effective immediately. They cited concerns about my mental health after my recent surgery. They recommended extended leave. In other words, shut up and go away. I drove back to the hospital anyway. But at the entrance, the security guard stopped me. He made a quick call, then apologized. I wasn't allowed inside. I stood in the parking lot staring at the building where I had saved lives for 5 years, the same place that now treated me like a threat. And then my phone rang. Dr. Sarah Kim. A trusted colleague from pediatric surgery. Her voice was hushed, nervous. She asked to meet at a coffee shop downtown, said she had information but couldn't risk talking at the hospital. 10 minutes later, she slid into the booth across from me, scanning the room before leaning in. She explained Brenda wasn't just one rogue nurse. She had connections. A cousin in IT. A best friend in HR. A boyfriend in security. A web of protection that shielded her at every turn. Then Dr. Kim showed me her phone. Screenshots. Emails. Messages. Brenda and her network joking about delaying care for certain patients. Targeting people. Teaching lessons. She sent the files directly to me. Finally. Proof. But Dr. Kim warned me, others who had tried to expose Brenda didn't last. Careers ruined by bad reviews, sudden reassignments, unexplained firings. Brenda's reach was everywhere. I promised to protect her identity. She left quickly and I noticed she took a long, cautious route back to her car. Paranoia wasn't just spreading, it was survival. I went home and backed up everything again. Multiple drives. Fake email accounts. Cloud services under names no one knew. This time I wouldn't lose it all. The next morning I walked to my car and froze. My windshield was shattered, glass glittering across the seat. And tucked under the wiper blade, a single note. Final warning. I called the police. They came, took a report, but I could see it in their eyes. Skeptical. No cameras, no witnesses, just a smashed windshield. To them it was nothing but petty vandalism. They'd file the report, close the case, and move on. I spent the morning at a repair shop, waiting for a new windshield. The lobby smelled like grease and burnt coffee. While mechanics worked, I sat there scrolling through the files Dr. Kim had given me. Every page was another gut punch. Brenda's little web of friends had been targeting patients for years, deliberately. Systematically. Then my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I opened it and froze. It was a photo of my sister's house. My sister, who lived 3 states away. Her kids played in that yard. The message underneath? Nice family. Be a shame if they needed emergency medical care. My blood turned to ice. I called her immediately. She was fine, confused by my frantic questions. I told her to be careful, to lock the doors, to watch for anything unusual. But how do you explain a threat like that without terrifying the people you love? That was it. The game had changed. This wasn't just about me anymore. Brenda's network wanted me to know they could reach anyone I cared about. Anywhere. I sat in my car after the repairs, hands gripping the wheel, weighing my options. I could sign the NDA, disappear, pretend none of this ever happened. Or, I could fight back. Even if it cost me everything. That evening my phone rang again. Dr. Blackwood. He asked me to come to his home. Said he'd been digging on his own, and what he found disturbed him. I drove to his neighborhood just as the sun dipped low. The street was lined with old oaks and neatly trimmed lawns. He opened the door himself, hurried me inside. His living room looked like a war room, boxes stacked high with files, financial records, personnel reports. He'd pulled everything he could on Brenda and her inner circle. And what he showed me made my stomach churn. Brenda's cousin in IT? He wasn't just covering tracks. He'd been altering wait time records, making it look like certain patients arrived hours later than they really had. Fake timestamps, manufactured logs, evidence on paper that matched Brenda's lies. Her best friend in HR? She wasn't dismissing complaints. She was destroying them. Rewriting sanitized versions, erasing details, making the victims sound hysterical or unreliable. 3 years of deliberate cover-ups. And the boyfriend in security? He'd been editing surveillance. Not just deleting clips, but splicing them, changing timestamps, fabricating entire sequences so reality itself could be rewritten. As if that wasn't enough, Blackwood had uncovered financial fraud. The group was padding timesheets, signing off on each other's fake hours, siphoning thousands from the hospital right under their noses. This wasn't just prejudice. This was organized corruption. We worked side by side for hours, piecing it all together. Real documents. Originals. Paper trails no one could erase with a keystroke. By midnight, we had a case airtight enough to crush them. I left with a box of evidence, loaded it carefully into my car. But as I slid behind the wheel, I noticed a vehicle idling down the block. Lights off, engine running. I pulled out. So did they. My pulse quickened. I made random turns, left, right, doubling back. The car stuck to me like glue. Then bam. They rammed my bumper. My car spun, jumped a curb, smashed into a mailbox. The airbag exploded, my head snapped back. By the time I came to, the other car was gone. Neighbors rushed out. Police came, ambulance too. I refused treatment. I gave a statement, shaking, but without a plate number or description. The cops just shrugged. Another dead end. They towed my wreck. I Ubered home, clutching that box like it was life itself. But when I reached my apartment, my heart stopped. The door ajar. Inside, chaos. Drawers open, papers scattered, everything ransacked. I checked the box. The documents were still there. They hadn't found what they wanted because I had taken it with me. Police came again, filed another report. 2 incidents in one night. Even they admitted it was suspicious. But without evidence, their hands were tied. Their advice? Find somewhere else to stay. So I packed a bag and checked into a cheap hotel under a fake name. Paid cash. Double-locked the door and shoved a chair against it. Sat on the bed surrounded by evidence, trying to figure out my next move. Messages flooded my phone. Dr. Blackwood asking if I was safe. Dr. Kim worried about my suspension. My sister panicked after my earlier call. I texted them all that I was fine. Then I shut the phone off. Removed the battery. If they were tracking me, they weren't going to find me tonight. The next morning, pounding at my door jolted me awake. Hotel security. They claimed there'd been a complaint and they needed to check my room. No. This wasn't right. Hotel security doesn't operate like that. I grabbed my bag and the documents. Slipped into the bathroom, shoved open the window. 1 story down to the pavement. I landed hard, pain ripping through my incision, but I ran. I needed somewhere safe. Somewhere Brenda's network couldn't reach. That's when I remembered Dr. Martinez, an old colleague who had retired to a farm outside the city. He'd once told me, if you ever need anything, call. I hoped he meant it. I rented a car, leaving a trail on my credit card, but I had no choice. Drove an hour out, constantly checking my mirrors. The rural roads were mercifully empty. When Martinez opened his door, surprise flashed across his face, but he welcomed me in. His wife made coffee as I spilled everything. They listened, horrified. Then they offered me their guest room, no questions asked. Their farm was secluded, monitored by cameras. Finally, a place where eyes couldn't follow me unnoticed. For 2 days, we built the case stronger. Martinez, with decades of hospital leadership, pinpointed the worst violations. His wife, a nurse, explained exactly how Brenda's network had manipulated protocols. Piece by piece, the puzzle came together. On the 3rd day, the landline rang. Martinez handed me the receiver. Dr. Blackwood. His voice was urgent. The board had scheduled an emergency meeting. Brenda's network had pushed too far. Their little financial scheme triggered an automatic audit. External investigators were already on the way. This was it, the chance we'd been waiting for. And Blackwood wanted me there. Because with outside auditors in the room, Brenda's network wouldn't be able to bury the truth. The night before the board meeting, I drove back to the city. But I didn't go home. Instead, I checked into a small hotel near the hospital under a different name. I spent the evening pacing, rehearsing, double-checking every file, every photo, every report. My nerves were raw, but I knew this was it. The moment everything had been leading to. The next morning, the hospital parking lot was overflowing. I spotted familiar cars, board members, but also others I didn't recognize. The auditors. This was real. Security tried to block me at the door, citing my suspension, but then Dr. Blackwood appeared. Calm, commanding. He overrode them, declaring me his official consultant for the investigation. That title gave me the access I needed. We walked through the hospital side by side. Staff stared as we passed. Some whispered, others looked away. Everyone knew something monumental was about to happen. And then I saw her. Brenda. Standing in the hallway outside the boardroom, whispering frantically with her cousin and her HR friend. The moment our eyes met, her face twisted with pure rage. Her cousin actually had to hold her back, as if he knew she was seconds from exploding. Inside the boardroom, the atmosphere was electric with tension. 5 board members on one side. 3 external auditors on the other. Dr. Blackwood and I sat at the end, our box of evidence between us. The board chair, sharp-eyed and composed, called the meeting to order. The lead auditor went first. His findings were damning: over $40,000 in overtime fraud, manipulated computer records, shredded complaints, years of deliberate cover-ups. The board members' faces grew darker with every word. Then it was my turn. I opened the box and slid packets of evidence across the polished table. Incident reports, witness testimonies, screenshots of Brenda's messages mocking patients, proof of discrimination, systematic, targeted, undeniable. I walked them through everything. The falsified records from my own ER visit, the testimonies of women humiliated and denied care, the consistent pattern of targeting patients for their religion, their appearance, their ethnicity. The room was silent but for the turning of pages and the scratching of pens. When I finished, the chair looked up. Does Ms. Brenda wish to respond? The doors opened. Brenda entered with her lawyer. She sat down, jaw tight, eyes burning. Her lawyer launched into denials. Fabricated evidence. A personal vendetta. My medical emergency had made me emotional, he claimed. But then the auditors started asking questions. Why the overtime discrepancies? Why the altered computer records? Why missing complaints? Each question cracked their story further. Brenda's cousin fumbled. The HR friend stammered. Their lawyer called for a recess. Through the glass, I watched them argue in the hallway. Brenda's cousin waved his arms, furious. The HR friend was crying. Brenda stood rigid, jaw clenched. When they returned, her lawyer announced they would not answer further questions without full union representation. But it didn't matter. The damage was already done. The board voted unanimously. The investigation would expand. All implicated parties suspended immediately. Law enforcement notified. Brenda's face drained of color as the chair read the decision. Her network, her shield, was crumbling. When the meeting ended, she broke free of her lawyer's grip and stormed toward me. She got inches from my face, eyes wild, voice shaking with fury. This isn't over, she hissed. You'll regret this. I know where you live. I know where your family lives. Her lawyer dragged her back, but her words lingered like poison. Dr. Blackwood escorted me to my car. He promised security would watch her. The police were notified of her threats. On hospital property, he said, I'd be safe. But I knew better. This wasn't over. The days that followed were chaos. Messages flooded in. Some praised me, thanking me for standing up. Others accused me of destroying careers. The hospital was divided, fractured down the middle. Dr. Kim called with good news. Other victims were coming forward. Now that Brenda's network was broken, people finally felt safe to speak. The investigation widened, more stories piling up. But Brenda fought back. Her union filed grievances, protests erupted outside the hospital. Local news swarmed the story. Her lawyer paraded her on television as a scapegoat, claiming she was being sacrificed to protect systemic failures. The public narrative twisted. Some believed her. Some saw me as the villain. Then came the blow I didn't see coming. Her boyfriend, the security supervisor, reinstated. The union argued he was just following orders. And just like that, he was back, controlling access, watching every camera feed. My safety inside that building evaporated. The threats escalated. One night, a fire alarm forced my entire building outside. When I returned, my apartment door was wide open. Nothing stolen. Just a message: we can reach you anytime we want. I moved across town. A safer building, more exits, tighter security. I told my sister it was work stress. I didn't tell her the truth, that I was living under siege. The investigation dragged on for months. Brenda's lawyer filed motion after motion, stalling every step. Some board members began wondering aloud if it was worth the damage to the hospital's reputation. But the auditors pushed forward. More fraud was uncovered, over $70,000 stolen. Years of manipulation exposed. And then the dam burst. Brenda's cousin cut a deal. Testified against her. Admitted everything. Overtime fraud, data manipulation, falsified patient records, all at Brenda's direction. Her HR friend tried to hold out, insisting she just followed procedure. But the evidence piled up. And then came the bombshell. The security boyfriend, greedy enough to keep backup footage for blackmail, ended up exposing Brenda completely. Video after video of her mistreating patients. Humiliating them. Laughing about it afterward. Her lawyer fought to spin it. But with each new victim coming forward, an elderly Sikh man denied pain meds, a young woman in a niqab turned away despite severe symptoms, the truth drowned out the lies. The insurance company stepped in, desperate to contain liability. They offered settlements, demanded reforms. And then came the offer to me. Substantial money. Covered medical bills. A formal apology. In exchange for silence. For signing their NDA. I refused. Not unless they agreed to more. I demanded a fund for every patient Brenda had harmed. Mandatory cultural sensitivity training. Independent oversight of complaints. Structural change. They caved. At the press conference, the board announced sweeping reforms. No legal wrongdoing admitted, but systemic failures acknowledged. And then Brenda's criminal trial. Fraud, conspiracy. Federal prosecutors built their case with precision. I testified, the cousin testified, dozens of hospital employees testified. The evidence was overwhelming: emails, financial trails, altered records. Brenda tried to play the role of the dedicated nurse, overwhelmed, misunderstood. But under cross-examination, her story collapsed. Her own words mocked patients. Her own hands signed the fraudulent timesheets. The jury deliberated 2 days. Guilty. On every count. Brenda got 3 years in federal prison. Her cousin, 18 months. Her HR friend, probation. The security boyfriend, probation. The hospital paid millions in settlements. Several board members resigned. And Dr. Blackwood? He was promoted to CEO, with a mandate to reform the entire culture. He offered me a new role, head of diversity and inclusion initiatives. Oversight, authority, budget. A chance to ensure no one else endured what I had. I accepted under conditions. Direct reporting to him. Independent power to investigate complaints. And slowly, painfully, the culture began to change. Anonymous reporting. Mandatory training. Patient advocates from diverse communities. Some staff resisted. Others left. Good riddance. The rest adapted. And patients noticed. Care improved. Trust grew. The scandal faded from headlines, but the reforms remained. Other hospitals followed suit. What started as my personal nightmare sparked systemic change. Brenda served 2 years before early release. She'll never work in healthcare again. Last I heard, she was folding clothes in retail. Sometimes I wonder if she feels regret. But honestly, it doesn't matter. Because the system that protected her is gone. The hospital where I nearly died became the place where I found my true calling. Not just as a surgeon, but as an advocate. I turned my trauma into change. My scars into strength. And now every patient who walks through those doors is safer because of it. If you enjoyed today's drama, just imagine what's waiting in the next one. Hit like, subscribe, and let's go find the next train wreck together. Thanks for watching.